Oftentimes I say how when it comes to these kind of cases and you have these terroristic cops throw out these wild random commands that you can't follow all of them at one time because you're only one person. You can only do one at a time. It's like they're doing Simon Says on steroids. That's exactly what happened with Tyre Nichols, because this latest update that came out just shows you how absolutely barbaric these cops were, even with their so-called demands of what they wanted him to do. He was pretty much set up to fail, which eventually led to his death. So basically what happened is, in the body cam footage, which I still have not watched and don't plan on watching, they said that Tyre Nichols was given 71 swift commands in 13 minutes to do. And pretty much it was hard for him to follow any of them because they were all barking them so-called commands out at him from multiple angles. How was he supposed to follow that? And they do that all the time in order to justify this person was resisting arrest or they weren't complying. So like I said, it's a very barbaric tactic that a lot of these cops tend to use. But I'm gonna go ahead and read the article so we can get more additional information. Terrorists gave Tyre Nichols an astonishing 71 orders in 13 minutes while they violently beat him, most of which were confusing or even impossible to obey. The 29-year-old was savagely beaten earlier this month by the Memphis, Tennessee cops and died days later from his horrific injuries. The defenseless FedEx worker was pulled over by police on January 7th and dealt blow after blow by the terrorists, punching, kicking, and beating him with a baton as he pleaded for his mother while lying bloodied on the pavement. A review of the footage by the New York Times found police gave at least 71 orders to Mr. Nichols, but many were conflicting and difficult to follow as they accused him of failing to comply and escalated their force. There it is right there. They did that so they could say he didn't comply. And I'm telling you, a lot of these cops do that with black people all the time and then say, oh, he didn't comply, or they didn't comply and they resisted. It's because they do stuff like that all the time. It's never, they don't give one solid command that you can follow, at least one that's reasonable, but they give these wild random things that you can't even do. Not to shift gears a little bit, but there was a PC man by the name, I think his name was Daniel Shaver. I heard some stories about him back in 2016 where they did the same thing with him. Like, the guy was handcuffed behind his back on the ground, and one of the commands that the cop gave him was to crawl to him. Now, how are you going to crawl to somebody while your hands is cuffed behind your back and you're laid down on the pavement? Like, how is that's supposed to happen? And when he tried to do it or made one wrong move, they ended up shooting him and they killed him. Now, I find it interesting PC doesn't talk about that story at all. And it's wild because that happened back in 2016. And I didn't learn about it until, I'm going to be honest, this year, after this happened. He was told to show his hands even when they were being held by police, ordered to get on the ground when he was already there, and instructed to move when he was being physically restrained. The 4 clips, 3 from body cameras and 1 from a surveillance camera attached to a post, have shocked and angered America. At 8:20 p.m. on January 7th, Nichols, who was born in Sacramento and moved to Memphis in February 2020, was driving home from a suburban park where he had taken photos on the sunset. He was driving along East Range Road in southeastern Memphis, when he encountered the police. One officer said he was cutting through traffic. And see, the thing is, because all of this stuff is coming out about these terrorists, it's going to be hard for a lot of people to even believe that he was even reckless driving, or should I say driving recklessly, because everything that's spewing out right now, even stuff about some of their past, is looking real shaky for them, like very shaky for them. Tack on the fact that most of these guys, well, the main culprits are black. Plus this Preston Hemphill that's gotten thrown into the mix. We'll see what they do with him, but I ain't holding my breath. It's going to be very interesting. This trial is going to be very interesting. Experts claim the footage is an example of contempt of cop in which officers harm civilians for perceived disobedience, which is unwarranted. Jeffrey Alpert, a professor of criminology and criminal justice at the University of South Carolina, said it was far more rampant in the 80s when I started doing police work than it was in the 90s or 2000s. Even before body cams, cops were getting more professional and wouldn't make it personal like it seemed to be in this case. It's just so far out the norm. And it's crazy that he said that it seems personal, because rumor has it is that Demetrius Haley, his ex, allegedly was messing around with Tyre Nichols, and that was a reason as to why he was going after him. I don't know how true that is, but that's just the word that's floating around the internet right now. And it's been floating around for the last couple of days. Even some people have been leaving it as a comment in my comment section. Some have been leaving it in the chat during the premieres. I've been seeing it pop up on Twitter. Other people have made videos about it. I've seen someone sent me a DM about it. So I don't know how true that is, but that's something that's been floating around. But it did seem kind of personal. Like, this didn't seem like some random attack or some random assault that led to a death. This sounded very targeted. And I'm gonna tell you this right now. If that came out to be true, I wouldn't be surprised if they escalated Demetrius Haley's charges up to first degree, because now they have a reason or a motive for them to say, oh, this was premeditated, like he was a target. But we'll see what happens. They may not, they may play it safe and keep it a second degree because they know they can get him on that. But if they can prove without the shadow of a doubt that it was premeditated, they're going to use that if it comes out to be true. But what they're probably going to do is they're probably going to speak with the ex of him to see if everything lines up. The footage shows that officers did not react responsibly and professionally to the situation, but instead egged each other on, with one officer even heard saying, I hope they stomp his ass, and they're talking about Preston Hemphill. It's amazing how this stuff is coming out about him, but they're trying their best to leave him out, or leave his name at least out of the equation, even though we pretty much have confirmed at this point that it was him that said it. The footage released by the city of Memphis shows Mr. Nichols being pulled over by officers with their firearms drawn. After he is pulled out of the car and is sat on the ground, all three officers surrounding him order him to get on the ground, clearly confusing the suspect. He replies that he is already sitting on the ground, but they continue to issue the same nonsensical orders to him while making physical threats. One order is, get on the ground, I'm going to tase your ass. It soon transpires that they want him lying on the ground, but when he moves, this further aggravates the officers. Mr. Nichols insists, you guys are really doing a lot right now, I'm just trying to go home. Police then pin down his arms, press a taser against his leg, and give further orders while he continues to respond, I'm on the ground. Eventually, he is told to move onto his stomach, but just 3 seconds later, they shoot pepper spray into his face. Mr. Nichols then tries to flee the scene, but makes it a few hundred yards away before he is restrained again. With one officer holding his left arm and the other holding his right, he is told to give them his hands as he looks incredulously at them. Cops then start punching him in the face and continue to pepper spray him in the brutal arrest. He tells the officers he will comply, but then another cop arrives and orders him to give him his hands despite them being restrained. The conflicting instructions only lead to more pepper spraying, punches, and kicks to the face. By now, he is barely conscious or coherent after being dealt multiple blows to the head, but officers still react as if he is disobeying orders. One officer commands, give me your hands, turn around, lay back. The officer with the body camera returns to the tussling men and Mr. Nichols and pulls his baton out of his holder, clasping it in his right hand. Watch out, I'm going to baton the F out of you, he tells Mr. Nichols. A fourth officer is now seen arriving with his right arm raised. Nichols is still pinned to the floor by 3 officers struggling and kicking. The officers with the raised arm, careful, deliberately and powerfully punches Nichols in the face, in the head, taking his time to get enough force. Even when handcuffed, the cops continue to give him baffling orders and attack him while lying defenseless on the ground. Now, you hear how all of that was just described? That is exactly why I don't need a visual as far as the video goes. Now, that's just in text of what the video showed. Imagine having the text and then seeing the video. That's exactly why I don't want to watch it. Days after sickening footage was revealed of the brutal beating of Tyre Nichols in Memphis, Tennessee, several questions remain, including why he was pulled over in the first place and what was ultimately the cause of his death. The footage has left many unanswered questions about the traffic stop involving the black motorist and the role played by police officers who stood by as he lay motionless on the pavement. The 5 disgraced terrorists had been fired and charged with the second-degree murder and other crimes in Nichols' death 3 days after the arrest. The video released Friday also renewed questions about how fatal encounters with law enforcement continue even after repeated calls for change. The recording shows police savagely beating Nichols, who was a FedEx worker, for 3 minutes while screaming profanities at him in an assault that the Nichols family legal team has likened to the infamous 1991 police beating of Los Angeles motorist Rodney King. Nichols calls out for his mother before his limp body is propped up against a squad car and the officers exchange fist bumps. I'm actually just going to read the 5 questions instead of actually going deeper into it because it's very, very, very lengthy. So the 5 questions that they had when it comes to this is: 1, what was the probable cause for the initial traffic stop? 2, why did the cops accuse of murdering Nichols treat him so brutally, and did any of them know the victim previously? That's going back to Demetrius Haley and the allegations that Tyre Nichols allegedly was messing around with this man's ex, and it could have led to what this is. And again, if they can prove that without a shadow of doubt that there's somehow a link, they might bump his charges up to first degree. The 3rd question is: which officer did what during the violence that killed Nichols? 4, ask why didn't cops render aid to Nichols after he became unresponsive, and why did EMTs wait until 20 minutes after arriving to help him out? And in case y'all also didn't know, those EMT workers, I think they got fired as well. It wasn't just the cops that got fired, but I believe they did as well. And the 5th and final question is: what was Nichols' cause of death? So those are like the 5 questions that they're asking. But like I said, they go way deep into detail about that. But it's very, very lengthy. What I'll probably do is I'll leave the link to the article and you can read that for yourself. But yeah, those are actually good questions to ask. But again, that one where they said, does it seem personal? I would agree. I'm going to ask y'all, do y'all think this was personal? Because to me, it definitely sounded personal. It really felt personal. Like, this is not something that you just do to some random person, like, at all. This was something that was really, really personal to at least one of them. And that Demetrius Haley one is for sure right there, especially when you look at the history of him. And, I did a video talking about him and Tadarius Bean and his history. This guy has very extremely heavy, intense, violent tendencies, and it makes you wonder what made him break up, or what made his ex break up with him. Was there domestic abuse going on in their relationship by his hands? I mean, it could very well be, but we'll see. A lot of this stuff is going to start unraveling as time continues to go on. I believe they have a court date getting ready to come up. I think Lisa did a video about that. I think they have a court date that's set. So this is going to be a story people are going to keep their eyes on for a very long time going forward.